Ron Skelton, welcome to Succession Stories. I was so excited to be on your show, How to Exit, and I appreciate coming on your podcast. And I love talking to podcasters. I know you love telling your story. And this is going to be a really interesting one because it's going to continue the series of talking to people in mergers and acquisitions. I not only want to learn about your experience as a serial entrepreneur, but of course, we're going to spend time talking about transition, talking about your transition and what you do to see successful exits for entrepreneurs. So I'm excited to have you. Welcome.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Let's jump in with your background. I saw in one of your bios out there somewhere that you're an M&A dude with a heart, which made me laugh. Does that mean that other M&A dudes don't have a heart? I mean, come on.
There's a lot out there that's all about the numbers. You know, my favorite thing to do is like sit down with the business owner, try to figure out where they want to go and see if I can help them get them there. And if I can, and it works for me, and if that's great. And if I can't, I'll introduce them to somebody else. But I just see I did the same thing in the real estate space when I was doing real estate. I honestly think you can be in this space, be honest with people, work with them, help them get where they want to be, and not have to be a ruthless business guy, or, you don't have to be what was that, blue horseshoe, loves anaconda. So you don't have to be the greedy cutthroat M&A guy that everybody thinks that's out there. I just don't think you have to be that guy.
And you weren't always that guy. You started out in your career. Where did you get started?
Well, I did some time in the military, got out of the military, did defense contracting and the .com world. Always been an entrepreneur. I think since an early childhood. Unlike a lot of people, like they kind of stumble into business and stuff. I got told I was not old enough to work for my father at a young age. So we lived 5 miles out in the woods. I grabbed the push mower, pushed it 5 miles into town, and was mowing lawns. And when he realized I was willing to work that hard for $1, he let me come and work for his painting business. So, that was kind of one of my first ventures into just being an entrepreneur. Like if I need money, I'll go get it.
So your dad had a painting business, and I think I read somewhere you ended up working for him for 4 years. Is that right?
Yeah, I actually ran it for 4 years. I was probably 12 or 13. When I was safely able to climb a ladder, I was, working for him. And then at some point, he said, you know what? I need to take some time off. I want to do some other stuff. Why don't you run this? So at 16 years old, he handed it over to me, and I ran the 3 crews we used to paint the houses and stuff. My first day there, I remember going up to some people, like the crews, about 2 or 3 people per house, per crew, and say, does anybody have a problem working for a 16-year-old? And one of my own friends raised his hand, and I was like, okay, you're done. And I let him go. So
were you still friends after that?
Yeah, we were friends a little bit later. Not that day. No, not that day.
Not that day.
Right. But he's like, I ain't working for you. We're friends. And I was like, okay, well then you're gone. So no, I ran that until I was about 20. I realized that I was making a lot of money, but I wasn't I didn't feel like I was getting where I wanted to get. I thought a college degree was the solution to that. I wasn't saving enough money for college. So I joined the military. Did military intelligence for the Air Force, and got my college degree, my first couple of college degrees there.
And you've done some digital marketing work. You've been a marketing executive. You've worked in startups in Silicon Valley. So you've seen what it looks like on the front end of getting a business off the ground. But now you are looking to acquire businesses or invest in businesses that are well established. I can relate to that. That's a space that I'm familiar with. Let's talk a bit about that. How did you get from where we were talking about in your past to this idea that you want to be in M&A and buying companies, well-established companies?
It started off, I was running I had a couple partners and I were running a real estate investment group, and the market turned on us. We were doing short sales and buying houses out of foreclosure and stuff. And market kind of dried up. The regulatory stuff became really difficult. Decided to move on from that. And I didn't know if I was burned out, or at the early stages that you can't tell. Am I burned out and I'm just not performing as well in this business? Or is the market really gone soft on us? So I brought in a performance coach. And one of the things he said was, man, you should be playing a bigger game. And we would close a house where there'd be $30,000 or $40,000 moving into the business account, not my personal account, but to the business. And I'd have that voice in the back of my head going, but you should be playing a bigger game. So at this point, I'd already been coaching other entrepreneurial real estate investors and stuff. I encouraged 3 or 4 of my friends to move from single family housing to mobile home parks and apartment complexes. And I kept thinking, man, if I move into that space, I just told these guys to move in. I'm a marketing nerd by trade. I'm going to just dominate this space like I did the foreclosure space. And I'm going to be hurting 2 or 3 people I really like. So started looking what's next. Like what, once you do mergers and not mergers and once you do like apartments and mobile home communities, what do those guys graduate to? And I don't know where I seen it or stumbled across. My wife and I were talking about moving and living abroad. And the thing that got my eye on the mergers and acquisitions is in some countries, it's easier to move there and live there for more than 90 days if you actually own a business there. So I started studying that, and I started falling in love with the idea of let's just buy a business that's already working and generating revenue. And that's kind of what started up. And so I hired a mentor, studied some courses, read everything I get my hands on, and I got busy after it.
Did you end up buying a business abroad?
No, not yet. It's funny thing is we bought quite a few actually. I did one of the courses there, and in some of these courses you can take, the course is brilliant. It teaches you stuff. It gets you your foundation, but it's kind of like a good school. The real value you're going to get from that is the network you make, the people inside of the program. And in one of those programs that are out there, we grouped up about 7 or 8 of us and started acquiring marketing companies. So we did what was referred to as a roll up. We worked on it for a little over a year and had put under contract under LOIs and with doing the closings on just under $100 million worth of marketing agencies. And one of the partners and a couple of the advisors offered to buy the rest of us out of the thing and continue on. And it was one of those, they made a good offer on it from where we were. So we did that in December, and in January, I started looking for another project and just got really busy with the podcast and some family life issues. We got family members who had passed away and stuff. So just about to kick off another big project here, probably in May or June.
That's exciting. Can we rewind and talk a little bit about this consortium? I know there's a third rail. You and I talked offline. I'll try to stay away from it. So help guide me there. But can we talk about some of the dynamics? There were 7 or 8 of you in that group. That sounds like a big number to me.
It is, and it's don't do it. I'm a big believer that a company needs one great leader, and then you might have 2 or 3 that are have strong leadership. But if you're a company of 8 and you have 8 alphas, female or male, I use that. It's a gender neutral term with me. But if you have high performers who expect to be the boss, it ends up being almost like you're managing every decision by committee because everybody has a voice and everybody is strong enough to voice their opinion and stand their ground. And it slowed us down. So that's one thing. We created this. We were hanging out together. We were in these meetings and networking, and we came up with the idea together. And the way we picked the 8 was like, who wants to play a role in this? And everybody that raised our hand, we took. So we didn't really vet their resume or whatever. We just figured we'd find this is going to be a big enough project. We'd find something they're good at to do. And then they'd all taken 1 or 2 courses from 1 or 2 of them, the mentors we like. So they're either in our program or a competing one that's really good. So we knew they had the skills, like the knowledge, and we needed the manpower. So we took everybody, and I won't do that again.
You had the manpower theoretically. What about the financing? Was that something that you were able to more easily secure because of the resumes and experiences of the group?
Yeah, we had a couple of members in the group that were had some recent exits, and they funded a big portion of it. We kept the finance needs down quite a bit. It's a very unique play in the roll up. We weren't like the P&E model where we're offering cash. We set up a entity and we're offering an exchange. Can't really go into the details of that. It's really proprietary what we set up. That part of our structure was probably what we spent the first 6 to 8 months with. We literally went to attorneys and said, we want to do A, B, C. And they're, A is a good idea. B and C, probably not. And we go, okay, A, D, E. And we just kept working on a system that would be low tax impact in the media. Because of some of these things, when you're doing roll-ups, if they issue stock exchange, you kind of got gifted some stock and have to pay taxes on that. So there was all these, terms and stuff, waterfall effect and everything that we had going on, kind of options to purchase. And the lawyers had it figured out. But the first 6 or 8 months was just designing a system that would keep our capital requirements low. We still paid for lawyers and attorneys and accountants and that type of stuff. But we were doing an equity exchange in the realm that we weren't like issuing multi-million-dollar purchases.
Okay, gotcha. So it wasn't like you were going out securing commercial loans or anything like that. In terms of finding the right opportunities, you mentioned you were doing a roll-up, or you did a roll-up on marketing services firms. How did you go about the search, you collectively as a group? How did you go about for the search process? And maybe you could share some of the criteria you were looking at the time.
Yeah. I would say 98% of our search was done through LinkedIn. There were 2 or 3 of us. I'll kind of give you a scale of this. There were 2 or 3 of us that were very actively using our LinkedIn accounts to meet the CEOs of marketing agencies. We would meet them under just hey, we're like connect to marketing agencies. Here's what we're up to. And we'd hear their story, their origin story, and how they created their agency. And then we would show them what we're doing and ask them if they wanted to be involved. And in the matter of probably just shy of 200 days, depending on who you ask on the start date, when we officially started talking to agencies, might be 200 to 215, somewhere in there, days. We talked to just shy of 200 agencies, about 190 something, right? Wow. And that means 1 hour conversations. And, the interesting thing was more of them said, yeah, we're interested, let's do this, than we agreed. Like, we were looking for world-class agencies. So the criteria was they, 6-figure EBITDA, in the upper, closer to the million, the better. We were looking at some that were very unique in what they do. So they were under the $1 million EBITDA, but then we were looking for they're world-class at some aspect of their business, meaning they might be the best SEO on the planet, or they might be the best social media, or they have the best internal tools. But for every agency we were looking for something that was world-class, because we were bolting these around. And we were primarily focusing on the US, but we had calls with agencies in the UK, Dubai, Australia. We weren't turning them away for the other countries. We even had one in, I forgot somewhere now, but just a little bitty country in the middle of nowhere. Four guy company, but they're just brilliant in what they did. So.
And when you got them on an initial call, did you ask them what prompted their interest? Why were they interested in talking to you? What was the most common answer did you find?
It's interesting is marketing agencies are a very unique breed in the fact that the path for their growth almost always has mergers and acquisitions in it. There's a like a false ceiling or a glass ceiling in marketing agencies. You start an agency, you start acquiring customers, you start training your staff. And then as you grow, there's this point where you've got the people trained where they're ready to do maybe a Coca-Cola or a BMW. Like, they want a big client because they've got the skill set, and they don't have the agency itself is too small to even bid on those type of projects. So they run into this problem where either they grow by acquiring another agency so they're big enough, or they end up getting acquired so that their talent can grow, or they lose, they're constantly losing their top talent to bigger agencies because they train these people and have them ready to handle those accounts, but they can't land them. So the agency owners were very open to talking to us about mergers and acquisitions activities. They're just used to it.
They're used to it.
Yeah.
And it wasn't retirement. It was really a growth strategy. They wanted to stay in the business, right? Or were they intending to transition out?
It was a big combination of all of them. Our program was 3 years. So from start to finish, if you got in on day one, we expected you to be there for 3 years until we went through the liquidity event. And then we expected you to tell us early on in the first few months whether or not you're staying or going, so that we can plan that and have have a succession plan for who's taking over your role. So we did have a mix of people who are staying and who are going, but it was just in full communication along the way. We have to imagine, the trick was, and the interesting thing we were doing was we had an overall arcing brand, and I can't say that on here, but under under the agreements we have when we sold. I can't tell you what we created, but the we had the overarching brand, but we were allowing every single agency, and we really wanted them to keep and maintain the brands that they were operating under. So, we were offering to, they keep their business card on one side, it looks exactly like it always has, and they flip it over and it's the parent agency. So if you were wanting to go bid at your local normal, businesses around there, you just use that brand you've always used. Everybody knows, loves, and trusts. But if you get told no on a bigger deal, you can say, hey, I'm part of this bigger conglomerate of agencies around the world. We're X number $100 million agency. We have all the resources you'd ever need. And they could bid as that. So that was the approach we were taking.
Gotcha. You and I had a great conversation on your show. And of course, now I flipped the mic on you, but you had asked me some questions about business transitions and what do I see as I'm out there talking to business owners. And I think I'll ask you kind of the same thing, as you talk to a lot of business owners and you get to know them and what their motivations are in the process. And at the same time, let's be clear, you're also trying to figure out if it's a fit for you.
Right.
What are some of the first questions you ask? It doesn't have to be meeting number one, but certainly in the first one or two meetings, what are some of those things that you're asking them to get to know whether or not this is a fit for you?
I always start with the origin story, kind of tell me how you created this. And then one of my favorite questions is, out of all the people you can be talking to today, why are you on the phone with me? What is it? What is it that I can do to help you out? There's a reason why they're on the phone talking to somebody who's either seeking to invest in or acquire their business. And I kind of need to get to the origin of that. Like I said earlier, I like to be the M&A guy with the heart. My goal is to figure out what they're trying to accomplish and see if I can help them get in there. Right. That's
what about transferability? You and I talked about that quite a bit on your show.
Yep.
And I have a lot of thoughts on that. What do you see literally? If a company is more or less transferable, how do you ferret that out? How do you try to understand? And then what type of impact is that having as you think about potential value of that deal?
Absolutely. So, in a lot of cases, the business owners you talk to, a lot of cases you're talking to business owners and they're carrying 3, 4, 5 hats and they haven't taken the time to felt all of those out. And one of the toughest conversations I have with business owners is like, look, yeah, you're pulling 80, 90 hours a week. I don't do that. And I don't know that I can hire anybody that will, because the reason you're doing it is you own it. So when you leave, I don't have to replace the CEO at X number of dollars. I need to replace the CEO at that figure. And then I got to bring in a top sales guy because you're the top sales guy, right? And there's one, it was a machine shop and the guy was the mechanic too. He fixed all the heavy duty machinist work, unless, so if one of the big lathes, or I don't know what else they have out there. I know they have presses and lathes, but I don't know the machine shop world that much. But if something broke, he would literally change his hat, put on some, whatever, and head out there into the shop and get greasy and fix the machines. And I'm like, so I got to hire a mechanic, a sales guy, and a CEO to run this. And it was more than that. But a lot of business owners don't realize how many hats they're wearing and how hard it is to transfer the business when you're wearing that many hats. So.
Yeah. And you might take a look at that machine shop, but you're certainly not going to pay a premium for it. And you might even pay less for that business than someone else might be willing to.
The particular one, he would have had to have double the revenue he had now in order for me to afford to bring on the team it took to run that business. Right. And so he would have to almost double in size. He was at a point where I could replace him and maybe the sales guy, but it was going to be lean. It was going to eat up every bit of their operating, cash flow to keep those people employed. So, and I don't know anybody that, you've heard of fractional CEOs and fractional chief marketing officers. I haven't heard of a fractional mechanic, right? So I don't know that you could do that, but I see, and it's not just him. It's just, there's a lot of that. There's a lot of, we talked a little bit. I own a pest control company. The first reason I hired mentors is my first purchase was a mistake. I bought something way too small. And, but as I talk to the other guys, I haven't acquired a second one because I've seen ones with 10 techs out on there, 6 or 8 trucks. and the owner is still owner operator, and he's wearing 2, 3, 4, 5 hats, right? And they don't see, when you start trying to, do the math and move like, okay, we're gonna have to hire this and this guy, your profit really isn't what you say it is, because that one guy's working 100 hours a week. I'm 50 and have 2 kids. I have no interest in working 100 hours a week. I did it when I was in my 20s in the tech industry. It's hard. It was hard in your 20s, right? I have no interest in it now.
Well, and when's the last time they took a vacation? It's a great question. When's the last time you took a vacation? And by the way, did you check email and do phone calls all day, or did you really disconnect? And so that's a telling question if people are anticipating that.
I absolutely ask that.
I get, yeah, for sure.
They don't even get why I'm asking a lot of times. Like, hey, when's the last time you took a vacation? And they tell you, and you're like, oh, cool. What did you do? Where did you go? All right. Was it fun? Did you get interrupted or anything? And I am intriguingly interested in their vacation, but the underlying story I'm looking for is, I got to go to the Bahamas for 3 weeks and nobody bugged me. Right. No, I went, Lowsome, like I went up to the lake and I worked, when the kids were out at the water and stuff, I was on my laptop doing stuff. I was like, that's not a vacation.
So how do you value a deal? You mentioned EBITDA as a typical factor in some of these smaller businesses. Are you doing normalized net income? And what might move that number up or down?
It's an interesting thing. I talk about this a lot. If you look at all the different models, I think the running joke is like MIT has 140 plus valuation models, right? I use a multiple EBITDA, and before everybody sends you messages and tells you that's a really bad idea, it's really soft for me. First thing I do on the phone is like, hey, when I'm talking to the business owner, if they bring up numbers right off the bat, I disagree with whatever they say. If they say they want 1.5 million for the business, like, awesome, let's see how we can get you there. It's exactly how I answer it, because I don't know anything yet. I haven't seen their financials. It's just awesome. Let's see how we can get you there. Sometimes getting you there is you need to double your income, your revenue before we can get you there. But as I kind of have a rule of thumb, and it's kind of like the same thing in the real estate space. If I can make the deal work and it makes sense, and I can, the reason I like the 3X model is I know that the money comes back within the first 3 years. If I can see a path of profitability and it's really going to work, and in a 3 to 5 year frame, I'll pretty much work with any of the business owners. And I do that multiple of EBITDA plus hard assets because I like real estate. So if they own their building and stuff, I want to acquire it too. But or I want to use that as part of the deal.
And what might be some of those reasons that you'd move it up or down? We talked about transferability. We talked about the role of the owner. What are some other things? You mentioned niche businesses like the marketing companies that you referred to. What might be some other factors that could move that number up or down?
I love recurring revenue model. I think it may be because I have a real estate background. So, if you've got a high base and really solid contracts that have paid you month in and month out, you do repeat work, that's one. Or if you have a recurring model, like a subscription model of some sort where they're expected to pay you every month, those get higher multiple. And I don't know of any mergers and acquisition guys that don't pay a higher multiple for that. Other things for me is how well is it managed? How many hours a week is it going to take? I do everything pretty much from Zoom or stuff. I've got interest in businesses here in town that I haven't been to in 2 years, right? And they're 5 miles away. We do everything on Zoom. Everything's, because I travel a bit and I don't want them to expect me to come running over to the shop every time, something happens. Right. So I've never even, the pest control, I've never even seen the storage facility where out the shop where all where the truck and the equipment set. I have an office over here where I keep the paperwork, and I go to my office, and they sent me photos. I know it looks okay, but it's 10 miles from here, and I just never went over there in 2 years.
What are red flags that would make you walk or run away from a deal?
I think the owner, to me, an owner has to be easy to work with. I have kind of a no jerks policy. I use a different word on my own show, but I'll be nice on yours. I have a no jerks policy. So if you're not easy to work with, I know that once I buy this, especially if I'm buying something I haven't run, I probably need to call you occasionally and say, hey, this just happened, or, it would be easier if I could. And I don't want to buy anything from somebody who's just constantly going to be hard to deal with, or unpleasant to deal with. I'm just not interested. Life's too short for that. The other one is I get it. I used to have the expectations that you have cleaned up your books and stuff, but I've had a couple of people on my show recently who has shown me the fallacy in my ways there. These business owners, a lot of them are what he referred to as accidental business owners, and I've adopted that phrase. They had a good product, people bought it, they grew a business around it, but they were never taught accounting and all that other stuff. They did what they needed to do their taxes and keep themselves out of trouble. But for me to come in, even if they're at the $1 million and above mark, for me to come into a company that's got 10 or less employees or 15 or less employees and expect you to have perfect books is kind of a false narrative. It's just not going to be there unless somebody's been grooming them for sale. And a lot of times that grooming can not be accurate either, right? They're trying too hard to put their best foot forward. So I changed that. I want clean books. I want to be able to understand it. I want to be able to see your tax, your 3 years of your tax returns, 3 years of, your bank statements, and know where the money's going. I'm currently redesigning part of my little team here so that if you got your tax returns and your bank statements, I can construct what the profit and loss should look like and the balance sheet should look like. And if you have them or not, I'm okay with that. I know people, I've met people in the last year that are running business doing 2 million a year and don't, 2 million a year. They've never created a profit and loss statement for anybody. They don't even know what a P&L looks like.
Right.
And they got good at building what they're building, put their head down, start building them and selling them. And next thing you know, they're making more money, than they thought they would with it. And it's getting close to time to do something else.
Yeah. So any particular deal terms you usually work within? So earnouts or, any long-term agreements, anything of note that you found are more or less acceptable to business owners and what they're looking for?
It's interesting is that I told you I'm interested in ones that are not perfect yet. One of the biggest pushbacks I've ever seen was I put a clause inside of mine on the LOI that says, I have 45 days after the due diligence process that if skeletons pop up or whatever, I can unwind it. I can basically hand you your business back and expect what monies I put forward back up. Just for the ones that are really like left some questionable stuff there, like you just don't know how they got where they are. And I got a lot of pushback from that. Like a lot of people are like, I don't want you handing this back to me. I'm done. Right. They're like, don't give it back to me. And I was a little shocked. I actually had an offer that went out. It seemed like I had a $1 offer on a $13 million company. I offered them $1 down and I'm going to take over $4.5 million of their debt. And just because their books were so thrashed. And I thought it was going to get thrown in my face. As a matter of fact, the Marine Corps friend of mine, prior Marine, just tough as nails. Actually, that performance coach that told me I should be playing a bigger game. I brought him in on a deal and because he's really good with keeping people's heads straight. Right when I slid that offer across the table, he puts on his mask, jumps up and heads to the bathroom, like kind of green. And he thought they were going to wad it up and throw it in my face, right? $1 down, $13 million a year run rate revenue on a concrete company. And I offered them $1 down, take over their debt because their books were just thrashed. And we couldn't put them back together and they weren't giving us everything. So I was like, okay, we'll take this on. But we put a 90-day unwind clause in there. And she was really concerned that I was going to get in there, start cleaning up things and hand it back to her.
Yep. Didn't want that. So did they successfully take it out of the agreement or did you insist on it staying in?
No, I insisted upon it stayed in. They actually said they gave us a verbal okay. And then because of some of that debt was that I said it was $4.5 million of debt. One of them was a federal institution and the other one was their bank. So they owed the bank over $1 million and they owed another company. The federal institution. I got to be careful because you can deduct. Okay. This is Oklahoma, right? The people listening can kind of probably figure out who this is, but they owed the one of the federal government entities nearly $1 million. And when they told them that we were going to take over the debt, both the bank and that particular three-lettered agency said, "Yeah, no." So they had to fix their financials. So the deal didn't go through, not because they didn't say no. They didn't say yes. The deal got stopped because both the bank and the bank was a little more interested in it than the other entity, but they were like, yeah, we're not going to let anybody, you're not letting you off the hook for liability of this. You created this mess. And
Right.
I'll be honest, we had already hired an attorney, and we'd already retained an attorney to negotiate that one way down, because they'd never had it reviewed. They never had their financials audited, and they've never challenged that amount that was owed. And I know an attorney here in town that's what they do. So.
Okay. Well, that's a good thing for, I think, listeners to hear, is there may be third parties who have input on a deal that you need to consider. Other examples that pop up are landlords, for example, or if you're a franchise, the franchisor. So what you just shared is a really good example. Ultimately, what I do sometimes, and when I start working with a client, is let's take a look at all of your assets, and maybe they're tangible or intangible. What are those things, and are they transferable? So if you have a lot of contracts, and that's what makes your business valuable, why someone's interested in it, how transferable are they? And that will also impact the type of transaction. Is it going to be an asset sale or an entity sale? And in that situation you were just talking about, you were going to assume the debt. So that was going to be an entity sale, correct?
Right. So it was going to be we were going to, So we were going to take over the entity and the debt on that. It was a hybrid. We were going to do an asset transfer. They had quite a bit of equipment. So we were going to do an asset transfer for a lot of them. They had 50 something vehicles, 26-acre facility. It had semis. They had a transportation unit, had an 8 or 10 semi to move concrete items around. And so we were going to do an asset transfer, and then do what you said, the entity transfer, just for the reason we were going to do that is there's some justification for splitting up that company. Day one, we were going to split it into a welding shop, because they had a full staff 24/7 that made all the hinges, doors, and everything. And they had the opportunity to make some stuff for other people. And then they had the concrete, and then they had a transportation company with multiple semis and stuff. And the transportation company had some issues. They had auto accidents. So the liability of that to separate it off into its own entity was kind of where we were headed.
Gotcha. And there's also different tax treatment in those two different types of transactions. Okay.
Right.
That makes sense. So as we start to wind down here, I want to ask you, what's one thing that you would advise people thinking about selling their company one day? What's the one thing they should be thinking about?
I think the one thing you want to think about is it's not an overnight process. You decide to sell your business today. We're going to look at your your track record. What I call your last 3 years of track record. So tax returns, financials, bank statements for the business, something to give us kind of a longer term view, at least 3 years view of where you've been and where you're going. So you can't just start packaging up today and decide to sell unless you've been running well for the last couple of years. The other thing is, I learned this last year, I always thought people sold to the highest and best offer, right? I would say more than probably 80% of these deals don't go that route. They're looking for the safest pair of hands. So understand what you want in your buyer. If you think it's money, I think when you get down to it towards the end, you'll figure out it's not as much the money. The money will probably be close between the top 2 or 3 potential buyers, but there are things out there that you're going to want more than money. Like, are your employees safe?
Yeah, that's great takeaway. A lot of times we do think it's a myth that it is going to go to the top buyer with the highest price. I do hear that often also, that it's more about fit, or there's other reasons that what makes that deal interesting to the seller. And it's a good message to share. So I appreciate you sharing that. If people want to get in touch with you, and maybe also, of course, happy to help and anyone wanted to talk about it with me as well. But if they want to reach out to you directly, Ron, and they have a business to sell, what's some of the criteria you're looking for to know whether or not it's a fit at the get-go?
Okay. So I want you to be really well run. So usually that means you've got 10 or more employees. If you deploy something, if you employ something like EOS and you're really good at it, I'll look at a smaller one. Revenue is $1 million a year or more. And either you have a general manager in mind, or somebody can take over the day-to-day operations, or you've got it set up to where it's documented what you do on a day-to-day basis. Because I'm not an owner operator. When I buy it, I'm kind of more going to be on the chairman of your board. I'm going to pick somebody externally or internally to be your general manager. Those guys will report to me on a weekly basis. And then after we build trust, probably bi-weekly or monthly. And then we do big quarterly planning sessions. So the cleaner you have it and the more ability that it has to run with the team that's there, that's what I'm looking for. So.
Gotcha. And any different industry, any geography?
I love home service businesses, and I'll probably do them just about anywhere. So that includes everything from fairly large cleaning services. I own a little pest control, probably not pest control in other states because of the regulatory, but if you can think of fence companies, pretty much anything that has to do with the home services, I'd be interested in, especially when I can cross-sell and upsell them. So a fence company and a pool cleaning company would be a great fit. If I can find them both in the same market, every time the pool cleaner goes, he sees that fence. Every city has a requirements for safety standards and zoning requirements on the fence that goes around swimming pools. So there's an easy cross-sell and upsell there. Same thing with like yard and yard maintenance, landscaping, that type of stuff. Those three would go together. So I'm interested in that. I have some guys who are working together in the auto space. So auto repair, towing, just like boring brick and mortar type companies that they've been around, keep jobs in your local market, those types of things. I'll tell you what I'm not interested in, like restaurants. A lot of work and a lot of passion has to go into owning a restaurant. If you're not passionate about that restaurant, it's going to be a tough one to run. They historically have a low profit margin. Anything highly regulated, not interested in. So
Gotcha.
Veterinarian services, that type of stuff where you have to set up specialty entities to own them. I'm not interested.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, I ask all my guests if they have a favorite saying or quote about entrepreneurship or leadership. Is there anything that comes to mind for you?
Yeah, I'm going to butcher it. I know I am. It's Zig Ziglar, right? If you can have anything in the world you want, if you help others get what they want, right? It's the gist of it. But I truly operate with what I refer to as a heart of service. I answer my phone on a regular basis. How may I be of service? And I get off the phone with even after I get off this podcast, like the question I ask myself: did I really provide value to them? I do that. After every podcast I have on my show, I'm like, how can I further their game? How can I be of service? So that getting people what they want, I truly believe Zig Ziglar nailed it. I don't know if he got that quote from somebody else or where he pulled it from or how he came up with the idea, but to help other people get where they want to go will get you anywhere you want to be. I'm a big fan of that. So
I'm a big fan too. That's awesome. How can people connect with you? What's a good way to find you?
I think the easiest way is LinkedIn. If you go to LinkedIn, if it's linkedin.com/Ron Skelton, RONSKELTON. But if you look up Ronald Skelton, I'm probably the only bald headed guy with a long goatee that's doing M&A on there. So I'm pretty good at Google.
You're willing to bet you are.
I'm pretty. I have a distinct enough look, So when I first did the M&A, my beard was a little longer, and one of the guys in that marketing roll up said, you kind of look like a biker. You look like the guy rolls up on a Harley. And so I shaved it way down nice and neat and clean, and I realized it didn't make any difference whatsoever. So this is about as long as I'll let it get, but it was longer.
Well, just one question for fun. What's one thing that I would be surprised to learn about you?
Let's see. It's been a while. I taught martial arts for 18 years. So I was hand-to-hand combat. And I used to think it was fun to go work in nightclubs to see if it worked. So I've worked at some rugby bars in their worst places, been stabbed twice, had guns in my face. The goal is never have to put my hands on anybody or never have to swing at anybody, I should say. So, got old, got lazy, I guess, blew my knees out and gained a bunch of weight. But that and I was an adrenaline junkie as a youth, right? So
what kind of adrenaline?
Motorcycle racing, motocross, skydiving, bungee jumping, you name it, I've done it.
Wow.
free diving. I lived in Hawaii for 3 years. Went free diving in the middle of the night with tiger sharks swimming around, and so yeah.
You are an adventurer.
Yeah. Got old. I turned 50. I joke around. I've had 6 knee surgeries and I gained a bunch of weight. I tell people I'm twice the man I used to be. But yeah.
Ron, you are great to talk to. It was a pleasure to be on your show. And again, thank you so much for coming on Succession Stories and sharing your words of wisdom, your experience with us. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate being here. And if anybody ever needs anything, I'll finish this off. It's like, how can I be of service?
Oh, that's great. So to the listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. As always, you can catch Succession Stories on any of your favorite podcast players or on our YouTube channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the show. And if you want to maximize the value of your business and plan for future transition, reach out to me for a complimentary assessment at meetlauriebarkman.com. Be sure to tune in next week for more insights from transition to transaction. Until then, here's to your success.